Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down the critical timeline and the life-saving techniques of proper farrowing sow management straight from our source material. Look, if you run a commercial farming operation or study animal science, you already know that the farrowing phase is arguably the most sensitive and financially impactful period in a pig's entire life cycle. So, let's just get right to it. Okay, let's dive into this massive number, 25%. Up to 25% of piglets die during the farrowing phase. I mean, that is a staggering loss of life and farm productivity. And what the data tells us is that the highest risk happens in the very first 72 hours of life. The margin for error here is razor thin, and leaving this process purely to chance is basically a recipe for disaster. So what's our goal here? The primary objective of this explainer is to equip you with the exact physiological knowledge and intervention steps you need to slash that mortality rate and protect your farm's productivity. We aren't just talking about basic animal husbandry here. We are talking about highly strategic birthing management that's driven by strict timelines and very specific biological cues. Here's how we're going to tackle this today. First, the high stakes. Second, the pre-farrowing timeline. Third, spotting the signs. Fourth, the birthing process. And finally, intervention and care. Starting off with Section 1, the high stakes, understanding the vulnerabilities. We really need to look at exactly what causes these tragic early losses in the barn before we can fix them. Think of giving birth like an exhausting Olympic event for the sow. She requires a massive amount of energy. If she doesn't have the high nutrition required to fuel strong, sustained uterine contractions, the whole birthing process stalls out. And when that happens, the piglets inside face severe oxygen deprivation. This leads to asphyxiation or them being born so incredibly weak that they just can't survive those critical first 72 hours. All right, moving to Section 2, the pre-farrowing timeline, or the crucial countdown. Proper management doesn't just start when the first piglet drops. It starts weeks in advance. You've got to start your interventions at 14 days out. That's day 100 of gestation. At this mark, the source material dictates parasite control and E. coli vaccines. Why E. coli? Well, it builds up the mother's immunity, which she'll then directly transfer to her piglets through her colostrum. Then, at 7 days before birth, day 107, you execute a strict protocol, a second deworming, washing the sow, and moving her to a completely disinfected farrowing crate. Just look at the contrast between a dirty, unwashed sow and a correctly cleaned one. Hitting that 7-day mark, strict biosecurity is absolutely non-negotiable. If you skip washing her completely clean of potential pathogens before moving her, you are literally carrying disease-causing pathogens straight into the sterile environment where vulnerable newborns are about to arrive. Beyond cleanliness, there are immense physiological demands. The sow needs a massive 45 liters of clean water every single day. To put that into perspective, that's like chugging 24 large soda bottles daily, and it needs to be delivered at a flow rate of 2 liters per minute just to physically support her milk production. If your water pressure is too low or the supply is restricted, she simply cannot produce the milk needed to keep her litter alive. It's a fundamental structural requirement of your barn. Which brings us to Section 3, spotting the signs, the anatomy of labor. Let's see how to spot the precise physiological signs that tell us birth is imminent. Gestation in pigs famously lasts 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days, roughly 114 days. But biology isn't perfectly mechanical, so you really need to know what to look for. As you get close to that 114-day mark, you're going to see some major behavioral shifts, specifically intense restlessness. The sow will start attempting to build a nest with whatever materials she can find, biting at the bars or pawing at the ground. This unusual restlessness is just her instinct taking over, signaling that her body is prepping for labor. On the physical side, keep an eye on the external reproductive organs. You'll notice a distinct swelling and softening of the vulva occurring 1 to 2 days before the first piglet arrives. Alongside this, her mammary glands are going to become significantly enlarged, and you'll clearly see the veins. But here is your absolute final warning sign. If you press the teat and see drops of clear fluid or colostrum appearing, well, the clock has officially run out. You got approximately 30 minutes until active delivery begins, meaning every single piece of your equipment must be ready, sanitized, and at arm's reach. So that kicks off Section 4, the birthing process, a 3-stage event. Breaking this chaotic event down is vital so we know what's normal and what's a giant red flag. The physiological event breaks down into 3 distinct parts. First up is the preparation phase, where uterine contractions begin and the cervix opens, which can last anywhere from 2 to 12 hours. Second is the active delivery phase, where the piglets actually emerge. And third is the expulsion of the placenta, generally happening 10 to 15 minutes after the final piglet is born. The really crucial thing to understand during active delivery is the mechanics of it. The sow is combining involuntary uterine contractions with forceful voluntary abdominal muscle pushes to expel the piglet. This takes immense stamina. As the piglet moves toward the cervix, these combined forces are what successfully deliver the newborn into the outside world. And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, Intervention and Care, when to step in. We have to know exactly when this natural process fails. Remember that staggering 25% mortality rate we talked about earlier? This is exactly where you prevent it. Timing is literally your ultimate diagnostic tool here. During a normal active delivery, you should see a new piglet every 15 to 20 minutes. So you've got to be checking in on the sow every 20 to 30 minutes. Because if that gap between piglets exceeds 45 minutes, or if she's straining intensely with no results, you are facing a life-threatening dystocia, meaning a stalled delivery. At that exact moment, you must step in. And if you do have to step in, scrambling for supplies is going to cost lives. Your intervention kit has to be fully stocked and ready to go. For the fragile piglets, you need temperature control, like heat lamps and drying powder. For infection control, you need clean needles, syringes, scissors, umbilical thread, and iodine. And crucially, you need specific pharmacological aids, things like oxytocin to stimulate contractions if the sow is suffering from fatigue, or PGF2 alpha to induce labor if necessary. Now, once the piglet is delivered, the job is definitely not over. Managing the environment is just as critical as managing the mother. Newborn piglets are incredibly susceptible to cold stress. You absolutely must utilize dedicated creep areas with artificial heat lamps to provide immediate thermal regulation. Failing to maintain this localized warmth is a primary cause of immediate shock and mortality in newborns. So, by understanding this exact biological timeline, from the day 100 vaccines all the way to the 30-minute colostrum warning, and having your intervention equipment ready before the very first contraction, you can totally transform these high-risk hours into a highly productive outcome for your farm. But I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought. Take a look at your facilities right now. Knowing the critical 45-minute window for a stalled delivery, is your farm fully equipped and trained to intervene today and bring that 25% mortality rate down to zero? It's a high-stakes question for sure, and the answer makes all the difference. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.